All right, welcome to another episode of the Buzz Beat podcast. We, as always, appreciate you for tuning in, no matter where you're listening to us, where you're coming from, and making us a part of your day. If you haven't had the chance to listen to our most recent episode, which did not include me, Brian Geisinger, did not include my co-host Darian. If you haven't had a chance to listen to that yet, that's where Richie, who's producing today, recaps the trade between the Phoenix Suns and the Charlotte Hornets last week, in which the Hornets received Josh Okogie, a wing, and 3 second-round picks in exchange for backup center and really one of the longest tenured guys on the roster, Nick Richards, someone who had been sort of like in trade murmurs for at least a year or so now, and he was finally dealt. The Hornets active, ahead of the deadline for the second straight year. So again, check in on that, get a full analysis from Richie. I got to say, it really it warmed my heart to hear him back on the microphone for the first time in about 6 months or so, and I appreciated him hopping on the mic quickly that night too, because we were going to be unable to record and have sort of like an instant breakdown, instant analysis of it. So that was again yeoman's effort there by Richie. But I'm Brian Geisinger. Today I will be joined by, as I mentioned, my co-host Darian. And today we're going to talk about a few different topics regarding the, dare I say, red hot, scorching hot Charlotte Hornets, who are in the midst of a bit of a set of wins here in the last week or so. But before we get into all of that, and we're going to talk about again a few different things, including the injury to Brandon Miller and sort of some analysis on some of the other young guys on the roster. Darian, how are you doing today?
If the Hornets are doing well, I'm doing well. that's they help dictate my mood. So I'm doing great though. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, it's been an interesting stretch. The most recent game for the Hornets was a 110-105 win on a Monday afternoon in Uptown against the Dallas Mavericks. That gave 3 wins in a row for the Hornets, including 2 that were on the road against Utah and the Chicago Bulls, and also 4 wins in the last 5 games. If you go back, the Hornets split a home and away, baseball doubleheader sort of game or a series with the Phoenix Suns. Although I guess there were a few. There was almost a week in between in between those games. So the Hornets win yesterday in Uptown without Brandon Miller. Pretty much everyone else back healthy, playing. No Luka Doncic, no Derek Lively, the second for the Dallas Mavericks, and I'm sure we'll end up touching on that game a little bit throughout, because I thought there was some good stuff that we saw in that matchup. But we got to start with the big news here. Sort of the implications of Brandon Miller. He suffered a torn ligament in his right wrist back on January 15th. That was the win out at Utah. If you watched that game, Brandon actually missed a couple of free throws, and just sort of, really wasn't sort of having his, expected shooting performance. And then news comes out a few days later. He's going to be out indefinitely. And, this almost certainly feels a little season ending for Miller, as we're, basically halfway through his second season. Jeff Stotts, who, if you follow the NBA, you know him. He's sort of like the injury expert with his database, and is sort of maybe the best guy in terms of like publicly facing information in terms of discussing injuries, what they can mean, putting them into plain terms, and also giving you the information that everyone sort of wants, which is how long will this person be out. Stotts mentioned that this sprain, the one that Miller suffered in his right wrist ligament, is one that Jaylen Brown and Bradley Beal sprained and needed surgery on. So we'll see sort of like what the recovery pathway is for Miller. In 6 months seems like the minimum that it would need time to heal fully. I would advocate that he take every second, every minute available to heal this thing up, because his production matters more next season and beyond than it does the final 3 months of this year. If he is out for the rest of the season, I will I will really miss getting to watch him play. One of my favorite guys in the league. But yeah, Darian, I'll flip it over to you. Just thoughts on the injury to Miller, what it means in the short term, as far as like how what how it might change how the team plays or the rotations now, what we've seen um, in the few games since then, and if you can extrapolate just sort of like thoughts, beyond this year regarding Miller and his recovery.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, Jalen Brown and both Bradley Beal had his injury as well. Very, very, very similar. I think the timeline is going to be more like Bradley Beal's in just terms of Bradley Beal. I think in 2022 received had this same injury uh, at around the same time. I think it was like 2 weeks later, I believe, technically. But either way, he was ready the following season. He was able to start the season just fine. I do want to see if I can't. I'm trying to look now and see if he had a dip in his production because I know Jalen Brown, after he had a dip in his production the following year. But I will say that his year was a little different because they were coming off COVID. So the year was shorter. And he had to return a little quicker. So his was more like 5 to 6 months. Bradley Beal was more around 8 months of recovery time. I would assume Brandon Miller's would be very similar, only just because of the fact that that they had the injury around the same time. As far as the impact now, I think that Nick Smith said it best, and we'll touch on him a little bit. We'll talk about it later a little bit, but he said it best by saying the next person needs to step up, and he was like that. In this case, it's me, and I think he's done that. But it definitely allows us to see a little different look with having two, you could say like two ball. I wouldn't say ball dominant guards, but two just ball heavy, guards. Considering also we're missing Trey Mann, so it's been interesting and it's been fun to watch that and see how those guys play off each other. Um, Also, I think that going forward, we're definitely going to miss like his size. I think that's something that we can never afford to lose. I know we just got Josh Okogie, but he's only like 6'3", 6'4". So that size will always be missed. His 3-point threat, even though he wasn't having the best shooting season, it's crazy to say that we're used to for someone who's only in their second year in the league, but he wasn't shooting as we're accustomed to. But I think that still it's not going to be easy to be replaced. And then also it's just we're missing out on the further development. I think the biggest thing for him is just to be out there, especially with the team being kind of where we are. The biggest thing we need is just our players to be active, whether that's this year, next year, doesn't matter. Or last year included, we just needed our players to be on the floor. And unfortunately, we still keep running into not having them. But going into the future, I think that next year it may not, he may not start off hot, which is unfortunate because that kind of happened this year. But to see what happens, I think that the roster is going to look a little different. There's going to be some changes as well, probably with his game. I know that one thing I personally say for him is that I would like for him to handle the ball a little better. We saw a game early in Detroit where he lost the ball. Luckily, he made it back with the game-winning shot. And then even in Utah, as we mentioned, now that I know he has an injury, it's a little different, but still, I think he lost the ball in that situation as well. So just being able to take care of the ball, he won't be able to do that. We'll work on that this offseason. I don't think that's going to have a major impact, but I definitely think it will, hinder it a little bit going into next season. I hope it seems as though as of right now, everything we know, he's going to make a full recovery. So I think that it's just maintained until he gets back. It's tough when someone you see as your second best player goes down, which, some people say it's Mark or Miles, but future wise, if you're being completely realistic, it's Brandon to me. So it's just unfortunate to have him go down, but if Nick Smith Jr. can continue stepping up, we don't know, and I'm talking about next season, but we don't know what's the situation with Trey Mann. But if he can come back, I think that will allow Brandon to come in a little more comfortably next year. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think the thing they'll miss most is just sort of like the quick trigger shooting from Miller, the movement shooting and everything that his off-ball game opens up, the screening, the cuts, the transition, connective passing, his ability to make plays coming off of down screens and kick it to the opposite wing or the opposite slot, or if he gets two on the ball, hitting the center on the roll. We saw a bit of an uptick with his assists per game this season, jumping up to 3.6 assists per game, up from 2.5 last year. In general, like a lot of his just sort of like counting stats jumped. He played more this season, in terms of minutes per game, more usage. So, no real more time on the basketball. So, no real surprise to see some of that stuff jump up. But I did think there was some like decent playmaking growth from Miller this season. He's not overly manipulative, but with his size, with his shooting gravity, again, I sort of like him as a supplemental playmaker. I keep harking back to this one game, but the win that they had, I think it was the only win they had in the month of December when they beat Indiana. His work using him in that game as a, sort of like a matchup hunting, large wing creator, going at Tyrese Halliburton, going after switches in both the fourth quarter, the last couple of minutes of that game, and right before halftime, has stuck out to me. I think that is that version of Miller, and it comes with the important caveat because the Pacers at that point in time were a bad defensive team, and Halliburton not a very good defender. The Indiana's played better defensively since then. Really since the calendar flipped to 25, Indiana's been solid on that side of the court. But I don't think that version of Miller is like the one that you can that Charlotte's definitely going to see. But I do think there is a version of him that is even like more deadly off the movement in terms of his ability to come off of screens, his ability to move without the basketball, relocate, spot up, and just use his size as a guy that can shoot over the top. Doesn't need a ton of separation, but just a guy who can get to his spots, rhythm up and let it fly. My hope for him though is that along with the recovery and the thing that I sort of like worry most about him in this regard is making sure that like this doesn't do anything development wise for him. I mean, obviously it's going to cost him a lot of game time. I'm sure there's going to be some, workout, downside to it as well. But Brennan's a guy that does need to get stronger. I mean, we've talked about it a lot. If he could play and absorb, if he could play through and absorb and administer more punishment with his ability especially when he's driving or if he's curling off screens, it would really go a long way for him. I'm not sure he's ever a guy that's going to get more explosive than he is. And so for me, I want him to be able to sort of like build out his strength program and be a guy that can really, really tap into his ability to shoot the basketball and his height, his length, and some of those secondary creation, passing skills. But the way to unlock that for him is really going to be by also getting stronger. So look, if this is it for him in year 2, he played 27 games. Obviously he's dealt with other injury throughout the year. 27 games, 34 minutes of contest, 21 points per game, 11 three-pointer attempts per game this season, up from 6.5 last year. I mean, that was clearly something that was going to be a part of the program for him this year. 60% of his field goals came from beyond the arc, up from 45% last year. Free throw rate, about the same. True shooting, a slight dip. Did not hit from the mid-range. You took fewer shots from the mid-range this season and made, in terms of a percentage, and made less of them this year too. So, again, it's a bummer to see him play, but it does open the door up for some other guys. And one of them in particular, which is Nick Smith. And he's the guy that actually I do think we need to talk about a little bit here. We kind of wanted to do a little progress report with some of the young players on the roster. So Darian, unless you have anything else to add on Brandon Miller, we can go ahead and flip over to NSJ.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay, cool. Well, look, Nick Smith, 20 years old, second year in the league, former late first round pick in 2023, which was, I believe, by way of the Denver Nuggets 2023 first round pick, and which was one of the pieces of draft capital the Hornets got the draft night in 2022 when they made the deal that sent Jalen Duren his draft rights to the Detroit Pistons. A wacky, confusing, and ultimately sad night for the Hornets. But this has been an interesting stretch with Nick Smith Jr., who we got to see a decent amount of his rookie year, right? Especially down the stretch. And it was he had good moments. He shot probably like an artificially good ball last season from deep, especially off the catch in a smaller sample. But he had some good moments, I thought, last season. And then later in the year, Trey Mann, Misic, those guys, really, Seth Curry, they became more of ball handling options for the Hornets. Miller sort of stepped into a larger role as the year progressed too. And then NSJ was just sort of like floating in the matrix. It felt like for a lot of the season, putting up numbers in Greensboro, occasionally getting mop up duty for the Hornets, hadn't looked really good, right? And then in the last 5 games, his average is 10 points, 3 rebounds, 39% on twos, 40% on threes, averaging about 22 minutes per game. So like those numbers aren't screaming at you from a wow, efficiency standpoint. The 40% on threes, that looks pretty good. I think we can sort of like explain away or maybe even talk a little bit more about the 2 point efficiency or lack thereof. But just before we sort of dig in a little bit further, Darian, what are your thoughts on NSJ, like where the Hornets are with him as a prospect and what you've seen over the last 2 weeks here?
One, I'm very happy that he's getting some run. I hate that it has to come with injury. Of course, you never really want to see guys like this is the only way they can get on the floor. But I really like what I've seen from him. He's becoming more, even though it's a short, very very small sample size, but he's becoming more of what I was hoping he would be when we drafted him. I like that he's a lot of his points have come off ball, but I do like the threat he is by having a ball in his hand. We saw that in the Dallas game. I like just how he plays with LaMelo because I think that's something that a lot of people were worried about, considering his you didn't really get to see him with guys like Anthony Black, Ricky Council the fourth when he was at Arkansas. Who else was on that team? Jordan Walsh, I believe, was on that team as well. So we didn't really get to see him interact with those guys. That was a fun team, but
they sort of a lot of talent, sort of underachieved, but amazing talent on that roster for sure.
And he was supposed to be like the leader, but then it kind of came Anthony Black after injury. But he's just becoming more of that. He's playing well off ball, like I said. I really like. I do wish we could see him pass a little more. He's just kind of just in there shooting, but I like that he's being confident in his game. He's taking these like quick floaters. He's taking these fadeaways. And he's creating space. I mean, we'll probably talk more about it, but in the Dallas game, while he did capitalize on being open in the corner, there were times where he created space for himself when no one else was around. Just unfortunately for a few of them, he was unable to hit the shot, but the space was there. Looked like a good shot. I really couldn't say anything about it. So seeing him do that, and then I can understand. We've seen specifically for the Hornets how tough it is for guys to spend so much time in the G League, lose on top of that, like as far as the Hornets just losing, injuries on top of that, changes on top of that, and they just they don't have their confidence anymore. He has just came out and just played basketball. I think that it's one of those things where when players have the yips, they always say, I just had to remember, I'm here to play basketball. And that's just what it looks like from NSJ, is that he's not trying to do too much or too little. He's just doing what the moment calls for. And I think he's capitalizing on that for sure. I know that there was like a brief little rumor that the Hornets were looking to trade him. So when I first saw him into the starting lineup instead of Seth, because usually it's been Seth in these kind of moments, I was concerned of maybe are they trying to up the trade value? But I don't know. Now it's tough because if you were, now he's playing kind of what you expected. Very small sample size, but if that was the plan, I feel like it kind of backfired because you could use a guy like this.
Yeah, I mean I don't really see the point in trading a guy like Nick Smith unless you really just thought he was plateauing as a player. I mean he doesn't turn 21 until April. Like he's still very very young. Former top 10 prospect. Sort of had his 1 year at Arkansas derailed by injury, but a guy that in terms of like his pre-college production and reputation is a guy that when I saw him play at the Nike Hoop Summit in Portland in 2023, or 2022, he was outstanding in that outing. Looked like the best player on the floor at times. So you could understand why people, front office guys, scouts who have been keeping up with him for a long time would there's a chance that a lot of those guys are still going to be pretty high on him because they know what he was capable of doing, against great competition, just 3 years ago. And I think there were enough flashes at Arkansas in his rookie season to sort of like continue to be interested in Smith. I know it hasn't like gone great, obviously, but I think even before just the last handful of games, like there were the two outings, one of the games against Phoenix and there was a game against Detroit back in early January. He played pretty well in those two. And I thought there were some good flashes from him. And I think it's really carried over, and seeing him sort of like step into this role without Miller. I don't think, Smith is a guy that I think on a night to night basis, it's going to be like tough to like really get like to just bank on like efficient scoring because he doesn't get to the line a lot or slash really ever. And that's like, he hasn't taken a free throw since the month of December. So like he never gets to the line. He's really reliant on jump shots. And the threes he gets are usually pretty good looks. It's often he's shooting off the catch and shoot threes. He got 2 wide open corner threes in that left corner against Dallas, one from Josh Green, who was basically a ghost offensively for most of that game, and then one off a really nice find from LaMelo. But then he showed some shot creation too. It's just like he doesn't in the half court, he doesn't get all the way to the rim, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a lot of like off dribble shots in that little like mid-range floater area, and like he's pretty good. Like that's clearly like a comfort zone for him, but you would almost like for that to be it's just too big a piece of his like interior offense,
right?
Or his like live ball finishing offense, that the shots from 6 feet to 12 feet off a dribble. Again, he has super nice touch, and it shows up in that area. It shows up with some of his other shooting indicator numbers. So like the bet with him has always been like his ability to move, in his shooting touch, in his creativity. Like that's the bet. So you're betting on sort of like his creation upside, and not even in the same way that you might for Trey Mann, who just has all these like wipeout crossover moves. But a guy like Smith, like he fits to me conceptually into like an NBA offense or as an NBA archetype. If you're thinking of like, these are different players, but just thinking about how like Terry Rozier was used with LaMelo, all the ghost screen actions, the pick and pops, slipping screens, a lot of threes, a lot of shots in the mid range. And, I think Rozier, I think he had his fans and he had his, detractors, but he ended up becoming like a very good offensive player despite having some quirks on that side of the court, or maybe not, a good offensive player. Maybe very good is a little heaping a little too much praise, but he made a lot of money and was, has been a good offensive player for a long time now. And so that's kind of the role I've always like pegged for Smith, for NSJ, is this sort of like small combo guard, off-ball mover type, and I really want to emphasize the movement component, the word move, because to me, when you watch him play, that's the thing that jumps off the screen the most. Like you want him popping around the court. You don't want him. I mean, yeah, it's one thing if he's stationed in the corner and he's hanging out there to get a kick out, but like most of his possessions, even if he isn't touching the ball, I want him flying around. I want him setting ghost screens, step up guard to guard screens, pistol action. I want it when the Hornets run double drag, 77 ball screen action. One of those screens is going to be Mark Williams or Moussa Diabate, but I want Nick Smith to be the other one. I want him ghosting out in the other direction as, LaMelo dribbles left and NSJ is ghosting or popping to the right wing. I thought he had 2 really nice plays in the game against Dallas where the Mavericks were loading up on LaMelo, right? And so they're either putting 2 on the ball, or there were other times too. They were throwing 2 defenders at him, even if there wasn't a ball screen. They were just going to go ahead and throw the double at him. And on one of those in the first half, it's on LaMelo's on the the left wing, left slot area. NSJ's in the opposite one. Dallas double teams LaMelo. Kicks it to his right. NSJ, no hesitation, right? Just boom, catch and go. And he's able to get downhill and he throws a pass. I think he think he drove and then like dished it to Mark Williams in the paint. Williams got fouled. Like that's the kind of stuff I want to see more of him. Like when LaMelo compromises the defense, and including times when like Smith is like involved in the action, a lot of those ghost screen actions with LaMelo, like I want him to be thinking getting into the gap, getting into the crease, because if they're going to load up and put two defenders on him, then there's space on the floor for an aggressive guard with some twitch to catch and go. And so I want to see more of that from NSJ, but I thought there were some promising signs in the Dallas game. So I like the ghost screens. You know, when the Hornets run Spain, stack Spain pick and roll, have Nick Smith Jr. be the back screener, right? Again, so some of this is stuff that like Rozier used to do when he was in Charlotte. Some of this is stuff that Brandon Miller was doing for Charles Lee and the current coaching staff. So like getting him into that kind of role where you're really leaning into his movement, I would kind of like to see him play next to LaMelo a fair amount, because I think that's how you're going to like really like set the table for him to step into some more efficient looks, as opposed to having him like either try to prop up the second unit, which is not looking real great offensively at the moment. I don't know if you've been charting some of those lineups. They're not great. And yeah, there's just a difference between playing off of Vasa Misic and playing off of LaMelo Ball, like stating the obvious. So for me, that's what I'm keeping my eye on, are the movement actions, specifically when he's playing off of LaMelo, and like how often is he able to get into a crease with a live dribble, playing off of LaMelo's deep pull up gravity. It's great that he can hit the corner threes. Like I believe in him on that. Like I like the shooting touch. But what else can he do? And can he turn any of those drives and any of that movement stuff either into more playmaking opportunities or into actually getting all the way to the rim? But there might be something, like I'm not out on NSJ, and I think the last couple of weeks, like his stock is certainly like trending upwards. So impressed with him here. Darian, any other thoughts on one Nick Smith Jr.?
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up very, very similar to what you were going to say. I actually had a few plays like that written down in my notes. Well, there was one where it was a ghost screen. He was coming up from the right side and he went to the left like hash, and LaMelo got doubled. Well, Kyrie tried to hedge and he kicked it out to NSJ, and Kyrie was off balance and NSJ pulled up and hit the shot. But if you look, there was a lane that he could have took and easily, I say finish at the rim, but we know he probably would have done a floater.
Yeah.
But either way. And then there was another possession, very, very similar action, except this time I think he just ended up doing the floater actually, but his gravity pulled Klay Thompson, Daniel Gafford, and I want to say it was Kyrie, all moved to NSJ as he put this floater up, which left, I think, Josh Green wide open in the corner. So we're seeing a lot of just how effective it is having someone that is too fast for you to really bet on one way. I think what's sometimes happens with Brandon Miller, they know he's going to pull it. It's just that he's so quick that it makes it a little difficult, but they can kind of bet that he's not going to try to pull past him. NSJ, you got to be a little more solid, and you got to understand, okay, he could go past me. He could go, he could pull up, because that lane for him when he shot that three was easily, he could have got to the rim, but he decided to pull up and he made it. But yeah, I think that it's just going to be fun watching them two play off each other. Also, I would like to see what LaMelo does off him. Just why not? We're entering the second half of the season, so I think there's just a lot of fun things that can happen in that backcourt. And when we drafted NSJ, I saw him as the Terry Rozier replacement. Now that was when I thought that pairing of LaMelo and Terry would probably fare better, because I know the year we were 43 and 39, I believe that was a really good pairing, and I thought NSJ was eventually going to take that role. It seems as though now I would say the idea of the team is kind of going in a different direction. So we may not see it, but I definitely think that's the best way to use them for sure. And it allows you to have Trey Mann. I know some people are saying, how do you have Trey Mann and NSJ? They're made the same size, and a lot of things are similar for them, but there's a lot of things that are different. They're also you can have them both.
Yeah, there's also just I know Mann is I know he's going to head into restricted free agency this summer, more than likely, but yeah, you can have all of these guys. At this point, you don't have to choose. Like they can have NSJ for 2 more years beyond this one on his rookie contract. And they could, I mean, I think they should be in the business of re-signing Trey Mann. Like they can absolutely keep all of these guys and then like, collect more data, in a year from now, 2 years from now, then start to make more decisions on these things. Like Nick Smith is still going to be a very, a team-friendly contract for at least 2 more years. And we need to know more about, like, we need to see him play like this consistently for 2 months or for the rest of the season, whatever. So like there's no need to like freak out about it just yet, but like we're noticing, and yeah, like I think they should still be like in the NSJ business, and I think it's good that he's starting and getting to play next to LaMelo, and I'm glad they have not gone back to the like I have a lot of respect for Seth Curry and him building out the career he has and him being a leader, the guy that can still like knock down shots, but this to me is a better usage of those sort of like small guard minutes, giving the bulk of those to NSJ. Okay, let's flip over to the most recent first round pick for the Hornets, to John Salaun, 19 years old, one of the youngest guys in the league. Again, still in theory would be signed if all of his options were picked up through the 2028 season. So 3 more years beyond this, including 2 of those team options. Rookie stats for Salaun, 34 games for the Hornets. I got to be honest, if you had asked me before the season, like over under 30 games for Salaun with the Hornets this year, I don't know if I would have taken the over. I really thought he was going to be in Greensboro for the majority of the season. I guess that was sort of banking on good health for Miles Bridges and Grant Williams, which, knowing the Hornets' track record in recent history, was probably a bad decision on my part. But that was my thoughts, and so 34 games, averaging just under 5 points, 4 rebounds, 1.1 assists per game, and obviously, no real surprise, he's really struggled with his shooting efficiency. 32% from the floor, 28% from deep, and then perhaps more concerning, he had his first game this week down on the farm with the Greensboro Swarm as they were playing the Grand Rapids Gold, the Denver Nuggets G League affiliate, and it did not go great for Salaun. 35 minutes, 10 points, 2 of 9 shooting from deep, 3 of 12 from the floor, 4 assists, and the Swarm were plus 11 with him on the court in a game that they won by 1 point. So real plus minus MVP to John Salaun in here. But it's also a little concerning maybe when you see the fact that KJ Simpson in this game went 13 of 21 from the floor, dished out 3 assists, scored 34 points in this game, basically did the thing that you expect like NBA players, or sort of like quad A players, guys that are sort of between the G League and the NBA. You expect them to go down and really put up numbers and to score and be efficient, fill the box score. I've not seen this Greensboro Swarm game. I'd be kind of curious to see at least some of the cut-ups of Salaun in it. I'm guessing they don't look too pretty, but knowing him and sort of like how he can have a impact defensively with stuff that doesn't always appear in the box score, I'd be kind of curious to see if there was something not being captured in the box score numbers, which are obviously are pretty darn rough. But yeah, look, to John, he needs to get stronger. He needs to get more flexible in his hips. He really struggles staying in front of guys, guarding in space. Obviously we've been saying this since the draft last year, but like the shooting is going to be a swing piece for him. He's going to eventually, if he's going to actually like stick in the NBA, he's going to have to like shoot in the mid to high 30s on volume, on catch and shoot, deep threes. Like that's got to be a part of the thing for him. I don't think he can even be just like a corner guy. Like I think he's got to be like above the break, give you some pick and pop kind of, ghost screen shooting. And I think we've seen flashes of that. He's had to take a lot of like tough shots this season. He's taken some of that's been on his own sort of volition. He's taken some difficult shots, some inefficient shots, and that certainly has dragged down his efficiency. But like, I wasn't expecting him to contribute this season much for the Hornets. When he did play, I didn't think it was going to go great. So none of this has been a surprise to me. How about you, Darian?
No, none of this has been a surprise to me at all. Everything that I expected from him, I think he's done, good or bad. I definitely expected the energy. I expected him to fly up and down the court. I expected him to look like a deer in headlights on defense at times, but also at times just off. I mean, honestly, just physical traits. Him to be like, oh, that was a pretty good defensive possession by him. Uh, but yeah, he's everything I thought he would be, and that's not necessarily a good thing. Um, I I know that there are people who are saying like we need to give him time, and we definitely do. It's still very very early in his career. It's just more so you wonder what how he's so raw. I don't know what he becomes. I don't. The best bet you have is that he can be some type of energetic defender, 3 point something of that mix. And there's guys who made careers off that who they may not stay on the same team for very long, but they have long careers where they just come off the bench and just provide a lot of energy and just do a lot of dirty work or hit shot. Like look at guys like Campaign. Like Campaign is a guy who I feel as though he keeps a job. It's not like he's the best player in the world, but he keeps a job. And while their skill sets are completely different, I'm just saying there's guys of that have done that. It's just really early. It's just hard to tell what's going to happen. He's very very young, so I'm just very interested to see how, especially with now we're seeing more and more what Charles Lee wants. How is Tajon going to how is he going to develop? Um, and that's really it. I mean that's just all I really have about him. I definitely didn't think he would play this many games. I will say that if you would have told me he would have played this many games, I wouldn't have thought I would have thought he looked better than what he does. Um, Sometimes that is a reflection of the team as well. So you could make that point, but overall, it's just obviously there's a lot of work to be done. But luckily, he has time, and apparently we have time because if we wouldn't have got him, if we did,
That's my point exactly. And regulators pointed this out in the chat. Tajon, he's 3 years younger than than KJ Simpson, so it probably shouldn't be too much of a surprise that KJ, as a guy who's 4 years out of high school now, is probably and a guy who has the ball a lot can put up numbers in the G League. Look, I've said this probably a handful of times now on this pod. Like Salaun is a huge player development swing for this front office. And so it's not just the pick. You don't just pick him 6 and say, hey, we'll see if he figures it out. Right. Like there has to be a plan in place. And my guess is that nothing that's happened so far this season is causing them to. I mean, you can push back on the pick, and 6 was a pretty large swing for Salaun, but you can push back on it. I get that. You can say we can toss out our 12-month-old scouting reports or 9-month-old scouting reports on Salaun, whatever. There's a lot of new information now too, obviously, given that he's played 30 plus games in the NBA. But that the front office had to be expecting this. They had to. Mm-hmm. Part of me does wonder. He didn't have much of an offseason coming over from playing in France, played into the summer. Then, in July, it's G League with the Hornets. And then in September, October, training camp, preseason. So maybe he's just hitting like a little bit of a wall for a 19-year-old. If you really sort of back it up to his age 18 season playing for Colette in France. So I want to give him a little bit more time and patience. And again, there's I'm certain that there was a plan in place for this. I still think there's an archetype for him because it's going to be him as a stretch. It's him as a stretch 4 that can switch around, do some different stuff for you defensively. Can the Hornets like to cross match a lot at the 4 and the 5, could guard some opposing 5s. So Mark Williams roams. You can use him to switch. He could be the low man, weak side help defender. He's really good in passing lanes. That's actually one of the things I think that's inarguable that he does pretty well. But a lot of that's just going to hinge on him getting stronger, him getting more laterally more skilled in space, and him developing a more compact offensive game. So a quicker more decisive, more accurate and efficient release from deep, and then being able to play off of the closeouts that he's able to get. So, I mean, I always thought for him it was going to take 2 or so years. To me, you know, we're going to cover him and we're going to keep up with the progression and the growth, assuming it's there, you know. But he's going to be the guy that, you know, you're going to have to take a sort of like longer view on him to see if it's going to, I mean, who knows if it's going to work or not. There's a ton of work to be done. He has a ways to go. He does play hard and he loves basketball, and there's like an archetype for him to fit into. And so
it jumps off the screen. Like you can tell he wants to be there. He wants to be better.
So like, I'm going to hold on. I'm going to hold on to that. Again, I don't, for me, he's not the guy. I probably wouldn't have taken him at 6, though I was sort of like, you know, I sort of liked him a little bit as a prospect. Okay. Would just like to say last thing real quickly. Moussa Diabate, we don't have time to really get into him, but just wanted to sort of point out he's played 32 games now for the Hornets, including 4 starts. He's really like in as the backup, you know, full-time center for the Hornets with Nick Richards now in the desert with the Suns. Yeah, I mean, it continues to be a switch defender, active on the offensive glass, use his speed. I thought he had trouble dealing with the physicality of Gafford in the Dallas game, but you can see his speed, his motor, his length. He can do some stuff for you at that position, but should be noted, 2-way players have a 50-game limit before they would have to be converted to signed to a standard NBA contract. So Charlotte has some time and some wiggle room to potentially figure something out. But if the plan is to make this guy the backup center for the rest of the season, perhaps beyond, then Charlotte's gonna have to make some decisions on him going forward. All right, we're gonna go ahead and wrap it up there. If you enjoy our work, please, we ask of you, leave us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever else you listen to your episodes. For those of y'all who tuned in, listened live, and were commenting in the chat, as always, we really appreciate that. I also appreciate Regulator making the note that the Hornets have collected a fair amount of Leos on their roster. I'm a Virgo personally, and I'm pretty close to the border with being a Leo. I have a lot of friends who are Leos too, so I like that being a component of the roster. I'll talk to we'll have to get an astrologist or something on here to say what that means.
There's like this Zodiac GM guy on Twitter.
Yeah, exactly.
He's good. He's good.
I wish I had like that idea. It was
genius.
Like it's a great idea. I actually think there's like someone could take it even a step further. I digress. We're getting into astrology now here, which means it's time to wrap it up. Darian, thank you for your time. Richie, appreciate you hopping on a few days ago to do the Nick Richards Trade podcast. Thank you as always for producing this. Everyone take care. Happy New Year. Yeah, that's right. I'm still saying it in 2025. Go Hornets. We'll talk to you guys soon.